So in this short lesson, I'm going to revise with you how we're going to go about writing the essay on George Orwell's Marrakesh. Reminding you about the essay question again, choose a non-fiction text which provokes a strong reaction in the reader. By referring to appropriate techniques, discuss how the writer creates this reaction. And in an introduction, we need to mention the author's name, George Orwell, the title of the piece of writing, Marrakesh, and we want to also use the words of the question. And the key thing is the strong reaction. So what is your strong reaction? Shock at poverty, horror at the living conditions of the Jews, outrage at the way women are treated. It's up to you. Or you could deal with a number of these things. You could also mention what images what techniques you're going to discuss, and that's fine, it's not compulsory. And you would probably want to say something briefly about what is it that the author is trying to do in this piece to get you to engage with him, to get you to understand the horrific conditions of poverty, to get you to understand perhaps the limits of colonialism and the fact that it does not get rid of poverty. If anything, it may make things worse for people. Now, there are so many things you could write about in this essay, and I wouldn't expect you to write about them all. So try and choose the ones that you reacted to most strongly when you first read it, and perhaps you mentioned in the quizzes that you've been submitting to me. So the shocking nature of extreme poverty is shown through the opening description of the funeral, the flies, the lack of coffin, the burying ground, the anecdote of the Arab navvy and the bread certainly helps to emphasise how even someone with a relatively good job doesn't have enough to stop himself from feeling hungry. The description of the living conditions of the Jews, so many details you could comment on there. The description of the treatment of women. The imagery used, particularly the fact that he keeps returning to imagery around insects, cloud of flies, as individual as bees. And the description of the hard lives of the peasants, the inadequate tools, so much of it being done by hand. Women gathering fodder for animals, piece by piece, and pulling it up to get every single inch of it. Anything like that. You could, if you wished, go through the essay technique by technique rather than story by story. You could look at the use of anecdote. Here you probably want to choose 2 or 3 and take a paragraph to explain each one. The use of the matter-of-fact tone. And however you can do this, if you can get tone in, that would be impressive. It's not an easy thing to write about. If you're more comfortable writing about other things, that's absolutely fine. But if you're looking for more than a bare pass at higher, that's what I would recommend, that you aim to write about some of these more difficult techniques. The use of the statistic, 13,000 people in one place. The use of a rhetorical question, and there's a few in the piece, and what impact they have. Also quite well connected with tone. The use of metaphors and similes. And you could write a paragraph about each one of those, and that would probably be more paragraphs than you're going to have space to write about. So again, focus on the ones that struck you when you were reading the piece, or ones that you feel that you could say quite a lot about. And remember, there may well be other things like the use of you, for example, which you might think is worth a paragraph by itself. Absolutely fine. Use the pre-L structure. So in other words, you're making a point first of all. Orwell evokes the reaction of shock. Your point should link back to the question. In his description of the living conditions of the Jews, for example. Refer to context. He shows that although most people are poor, the Jews suffer additional discrimination and overcrowding. Evidence, which is almost certainly going to be a quotation. Many of the streets are a good deal less than 6 feet wide. The houses are completely windowless, and sore-eyed children cluster everywhere in unbelievable numbers, like clouds of flies. And in the analysis, you get a chance to explain what you think are the highlights, the most interesting things about this description, and that's totally up to you. The simile, cloud of flies, the sore-eyed children, and what that suggests to you. 6 feet wide, really shocking. That's the length of a man. That's also the length we're supposed to be keeping away from each other in this new crisis. It's not really wide enough for an actual street where cars pass down. And then move on to the evaluation and link back to the question. So how does the description shock the reader? What makes it particularly powerful? Why is it, in other words, that he's chosen to share these details? So in summary, your essay should be between 600 to 800 words. You can write it and upload it in Word, or you can take a photo if you've written it in your jotter and some paper. In both cases, please submit it through assignments. I will put a Word template up there, but there's also an add work option if you're doing it on your own Word document or you're uploading a photo. You will absolutely not be able to cover all of the points that I've suggested here. Aim to cover as many as you can. If you've written the whole essay on the first paragraph or the first couple of paragraphs of the story, which you probably could do if you analysed every single piece of word choice and technique that he uses, it wouldn't really show a depth of understanding of the whole piece, so that would be a problem when it comes to marking it. Aim to choose a range of examples from at least 3 parts of the piece. For example, the Jews, the women, the peasants, or the funeral, the donkeys and the Arab navvy, or any other combination. And finally, try and write about the examples that particularly shocked you when you first read it. In your answers to your quizzes, some people came up with really individual responses and really good justifications for why they thought something was powerful. Go back and use that to create your own response to this piece of writing. You will write best about the ones that you've come up with for yourself rather than the ones that you have simply learned about through watching the PowerPoints. Good luck. I'd like you to have finished this essay by the end of this week. If that's unrealistic, then you can submit it at some point during the Easter holidays.